everyone. As some of you know, I've been dealing with kind of a mystery illness for about a year now, and we are narrowing things down, and it's looking like it's probably long COVID. But that in itself has been quite the journey. So I thought I would make a series of videos to just kind of update people on my progress, but also in the hopes that this might help someone who's dealing with something similar. It's been very difficult to get a diagnosis. I still don't technically have a diagnosis, um, but we've kind of ruled out everything else at this point. So today I thought I would kind of focus on just the backstory and exactly what I've been dealing with. And then in the future, I'm going to make a series of videos on some of the specific strategies that I'm trying. And I'll try to link some of the research that I found that has helped me a lot, and a couple of other YouTube channels that have had some really great information that have helped me just kind of wrap my head around what's happening and where to start. So, as a little backstory, I have had two COVID vaccines and one booster. Shortly after my booster, I had my first round of acute COVID. It was pretty typical. It was mild in the sense that I didn't have to go to the hospital, but it was pretty rough for a couple of weeks there. Felt like very intense flu, couldn't get out of bed for a few days, started to get a little bit better, and then kind of a second wave would hit about a week in. And I'd be back in bed for a few days, and then it would slowly go away. So after about 2 weeks or so, I felt fine. About a year later, I had my second round of COVID. Same thing. It was about 2 weeks of not being super functional, and then I was over it and back at work. I had my third round of COVID in mid-August of 23. And that one was very similar at the time. It was the same kind of 2 weeks out. And then I was starting to feel better. So I came back to work. But after that, probably a few weeks later, I felt like I was getting COVID again, but I was testing negative. So I thought, well, I must just have another virus. But that kept happening over and over again. I think in the 23-24 school year, I was probably out 7, 8 times. So at that time, I thought I must just be really run down. My immune system's not functioning. It was a very stressful year. There were a couple of new projects that were added that were very large projects that I was taking care of on top of all my regular duties. So it was a very stressful time. And I thought maybe it was just the stress. In November of 23, I also had a bizarre hypertensive crisis event that landed me in the hospital. I had just started to feel a little bit better from another one of those, viruses or whatever was happening at the time. I had come back to work and I was sitting at my desk and felt a little bit dizzy. And then it went away, and I thought, well, it was weird. And then I started to feel some chest pain, and that started to go away. But I thought those two things are not good together. So I decided to go to urgent care just to get checked out and see what was going on. But while I was checking into urgent care, I almost passed out, and they rushed me to the back. My heart rate was through the roof. My blood pressure was crazy high. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but it was 2 something over 1 something. And eventually they said, we need to send you to the ER. So they put me in an ambulance and sent me to the hospital. And I was feeling a little bit better. My blood pressure was still really high, though, and I had 2 more kind of spikes while I was in the hospital. And eventually, all the tests came back. It wasn't a heart attack. It wasn't a stroke. So they told me to follow up with a cardiologist and my primary physician. And that started this long road of test after test after test and seeing tons of specialists and trying to figure out what in the world was happening. So after a few months, the cardiologist said everything looks fine. I saw a hematologist that I'm still kind of working with, but all of that testing has come back clear. The one thing that they did see in some of my blood work was an elevated platelet count. And so that was what prompted the visit to the hematologist. And we did a lot of cancer screenings. Thankfully, those have all come back clear. So At this point, since long COVID, for the most part, is a diagnosis of exclusion, they pretty much just have to rule everything else out first. They have to test for all the things they can test for and then look at what's left. So that is a distinct possibility. And there is a lot of evidence for people having repeated rounds of acute COVID, then later having issues with long COVID. Hi, Mica. Okay, girl. So, as I was going through all of that testing, I kept getting these viruses, and I would be out of work for a few days and I'd come back. It got progressively worse. And towards the end of the 23-24 school year, about mid May, I was really feeling terrible. I just couldn't function. And I had to take a whole week off just before the end of the school year. I felt a little bit better. Came back for that last week of school to wrap things up. And then I just told everyone I'm not doing any work over the summer. I need to focus on getting healthy. And about 3 weeks into summer, I started feeling a lot better. After that period of extreme rest, I felt quite a bit better. And then by the end of the summer, which was about 8 weeks or so, I felt pretty good. I had some energy again and I was able to do very light exercise. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm over this. This is great. 3 days into the new school year, I got sick again and it just kept getting worse and worse. And then just about a week ago, I went into my primary physician and said, I can't work anymore. You know, the last week before that, I was able to come in one half day, and every other day I was just in bed. I felt so sick. I felt like I had another virus. And um, I'm just not able to function at work right now. So I'm on an extended period of leave while I rest because that's the one thing that has proven to help. But I'm also using this time to really research heavily what has worked for other people. And there are people who have recovered from long COVID. So there's some great recovery groups that I'll share with you guys, and some really great resources. Unfortunately, there's not one main thing that everyone who recovered did. It's everybody's story is a little bit different. And I think the way long COVID affects the body can be a little different. There are some similarities, but there's something like 200 symptoms that you can have. There's 2 or 3 really common ones, the fatigue, the brain fog, and a few other things. But the fatigue and the brain fog have been my biggest challenges right now. And when I say fatigue, it's not fatigue in the sense that, you know, you went out a lot and you're a little tired. It's fatigue meaning I feel like I have the flu. It's intense body shutdown. It is intense muscle pain. Um, some days it's really difficult just to get out of bed. And it's kind of a challenging time. It's a little scary. I'm not gonna lie. Not knowing how long this is going to take. There are people that still haven't recovered from long COVID. None of the doctors that I've worked with locally really specialize in this. It's tough when there's no clear test and no clear diagnosis with a prescribed treatment plan. You know, a lot of this is going to be trial and error. You know, I have to try new things and see what works and see what doesn't and just get through it as best I can. But I am convinced that I will find a solution. I'm going to find what works for me. I'm just going to keep at this until I find the right combination. So thanks for coming along with me. I appreciate you watching the video, and stay tuned for more updates and hopefully some good resources for anyone you may know who may be going through something similar. Bye for now.